As of April 2025, over 2 years have passed since the release of Resident Evil 4 Remake. Yet Capcom has not revealed any details about Resident Evil 9. However, the series' rule of real-time aging, aligning in-game timelines with real-world years, poses significant challenges for it. Following this rule, 9's story would occur around 2025. By that time, Leon Kennedy would be 48, Ada Wong 51, and Chris Redfield 52 years old. What's more, since Resident Evil 6, no main characters besides Chris Redfield have reappeared in mainline games for 12 years. Whether future titles will adopt character designs from Resident Evil, Death Island remains uncertain, but you will probably see them visibly aging in 9.
What do you want me to tell them?
This suggests that the 9th may relegate legacy characters to supporting roles gradually, forcing Capcom to address a critical issue, selecting second-generation characters to inherit their storylines. Resident Evil 4 Remake, and its Separate Ways DLC expanded Wesker's storyline, adding Easter eggs like Excella, Progenitor Flower, and an Africa map, which can be seen in Resident Evil 5. Meanwhile, Resident Evil 8's 4 key areas: the Werewolf Village, Lady Dimitrescu's Castle, Moro's Reservoir, and Heisenberg's Factory, mirror 4 Remake's Spanish Village, Lake, Ramon's Castle, and Sadler's Factory. Even the boat sections, and Chicken Coop in 4 Remake, seems to foreshadow Resident Evil 5's Swamp, and Chicken Coop settings. If Resident Evil 5 Remake is indeed to be remade, remakes of 0, 1, and Code Veronica would likely dominate Capcom's schedule. Even 6, closely linked to 5's plots, including Wesker and his son Jake, could join Capcom's remake roadmap.
Yeah, I did.
Capcom has released 3 remakes between 2013 and 2025. If no successor of Chris appears in Resident Evil 9, Chris, visibly aged in 8, and confirmed alive at 64 in 2037 via Shadow of Rose DLC, would be likely to approach 60 in Resident Evil 10, if more remakes delay the mainline series. So, who is Chris's ideal successor? My answer is Piers Nivans, in Resident Evil 6. I have 4 key reasons. If you're unfamiliar with Piers Nivans, the following segment will introduce him. If you're a veteran, feel free to skip this section. Born in 1987 to a military family, Piers Nivans honed elite sniper skills through U.S. Army Special Forces training. In 2010, however, during the training, he began to question his purpose in the Army. Then he joined BSAA North America at Chris Redfield's invitation. His missions included the 2010 Australian Philosophers University outbreak, and the 2012 Mahaval School incident in Southeast Asia, where he lost Comrade Merabiji. In December 2012, during the Adonian War in Eastern Europe, Carla Radames unleashed the C virus, decimating Chris' squad. Most of the squad members were infected by the C virus and turned into monsters, which made Chris unwilling to kill them. Traumatized by his teammates' mutations, Chris developed amnesia. Yet Piers miraculously rescued him from death. In May 2013, Piers tracked down the missing Chris and pulled him from alcoholism to join the Lanxian, China anti-bioterrorism operation.
Suppress the bioterror outbreak.
Amid C-virus chaos, Chris regained his memories through squad losses. He remembered what happened half a year ago, and decided to take revenge on that woman, Ada. After clashing with Leon, their driving skills and combat experience cornered Carla at a dock, where Carla was shot by Simon's killer, and Piers secured the last enhanced C-virus from her bag. After Carla warned of a C-virus missile launch, Chris and Piers left for the aircraft carrier carrying the missile. Piers' demolition expertise breached the way to the carrier's control room. But they can't stop the missile from being launched.
the city!
According to Leon's information, Chris and Piers knew that Jake and Sherry were arrested in a subsea facility. Then they head for the oil rig near China to rescue them. Beneath the rig, in order to cover their evacuation, they fought the prematurely hatched house in the BOW research facility. During escape, Piers' right arm was crushed by House, which forced him to inject the enhanced C virus, gaining an electrified mutation to save Chris, and then defeat House. Refusing to surface as a BOW, he gave Chris his BSAA armband. Let Chris leave alone. Destroyed House with a final lightning blast, sacrificing himself in the depths, and Chris was saved. Then, let me elaborate on the 4 core reasons for Piers' return. First, the death of Ethan Winters. Initially, Ethan Winters seemed perfect in inheriting Chris' storyline. As a husband defeating Evelyn to save his wife Mia, then as a father sacrificing himself to rescue Rosemary from Miranda. His experiences in anti-bioterrorism and his unwavering qualities made him capable of competing for Chris' successor. But perhaps because Capcom's focus is on showing the harm caused by the bioterrorism to civilians, such as the Baker family and Ethan's family, Capcom did not choose to make him the successor to Chris' storyline. Thus Resident Evil 8 confirms Ethan died at the start of 7, revived only through mold infection. And even if he reappears, the Shadows of Rose DLC reveals he remains trapped in the mold realm until 2037, making him unavailable for inheriting Chris' storyline. Second, the unsuitability of potential surviving characters. Rosemary Winters only accepts her mold abilities by the end of the Shadows of Rose DLC in 2037, meaning she lives as a civilian under Chris' protection until then. And I think there must be a male character among Chris's successors, while candidates like Moira Burton, Natalia Corda, and Sheva Alomar theoretically qualify, but they are more suitable to team up with a male character. Characters like Sherry Birkin and Helena Harper, being US agents, better align with Leon's storyline. And it would be strange to let Wesker's mercenary son Jack Muller, who was once part of the mercenary group that killed BSAA soldiers, continue Chris's story, but he has a plot intersection with Piers, which could allow him to appear in the subsequent titles. Third, the efforts required to develop new characters. Ethan Winters, as the protagonist of Resident Evil 7 and 8, was suited to inherit Chris' storyline. Capcom has devoted significant narrative resources to crafting this emotionally resonant character. However, his death undeniably delivered a heavy blow to both Chris and fans who cherished him. At the same time, you can see that developing a successful character with such depth undoubtedly requires much. What's more, there are still some titles to be remade later. Here, I need to mention the Houndwolf Squad from Resident Evil 8. Capcom's official art book reveals they initially intended to showcase each member's contributions, but ultimately abandoned the idea. From their limited in-game scenes, we can observe that each member possesses considerable combat expertise. However, as newly introduced characters in RE8, their excessive numbers and lack of standout roles present a problem. If Capcom were to position any Houndwolf member as Chris' successor, they would need to invest massive efforts, just like creating an entirely new character, if that member is not Piers Nivans. This would inevitably consume narrative resources that should be allocated to legacy characters, particularly Leon and Ada, who haven't appeared in mainline games for 12 years. Fourth, the success in Piers' character portrayal. His return can serve as the optimal solution to the aforementioned 3 issues. Born in 1987, he is even 3 years younger than Ethan Winters. Though formally introduced as a protagonist in Resident Evil 6, his first appearance actually occurred in the comic Resident Evil, The Mahawa Desire, and we can see that Capcom was very serious in laying the groundwork for this character. Throughout Resident Evil 6 narrative, he demonstrated quintessential qualities befitting Chris' successor, considering his lightning reflexes, unwavering focus, and a familial loyalty to comrades. As BSAA's elite driver, sniper, and demolitions expert, he maintained exceptional squad survival rates while spearheading anti-bioterrorism operations. He showed profound respect for Captain Chris and was proved pivotal in revitalizing the traumatized leader suffered in Edonia. Capcom explicitly established Chris' endorsement of Piers as his heir through in-game storytelling. This showed that he was able to take on such responsibility, regardless of subjective or objective conditions.
I don't think I'm ready for that.
And the climactic battle against House saw him sacrifice his right arm, self-inject the enhanced C-virus, and unleash an electrifying final strike to ensure Chris' escape, a moment that resonated deeply with players worldwide.
Piers, come on, just stay with me. You're gonna be okay.
I'm sorry, Captain. I did it. For the BSAA. For the future.
Piers! Damn it.
Just go!
No. You're gonna be okay. We're almost there. Here we go, Piers. We're getting out of here.
Piers! No, don't do this!
Open the door!
God damn it! Listen to me! We can still both get out of here! There's still time! What are you doing? No, Piers, don't! You can still make it out! God damn it, Piers!
No! Piers, open the goddamn door! That's an order! No. Piers!
Reintroducing him would not only capitalize on existing popularity to delight veteran fans, but also conserve Capcom's character development resources, since they can give a previous on story just like what they did in Resident Evil 8. His latent appeal can position him perfectly to headline future Resident Evil series, while bridging narrative continuity of Chris' storyline.
Hard to find a good steak around here.
Of course, some may have doubts about Piers' possible return. I've categorized these concerns into 4 points and will address them logically. First, Piers' sacrifice made him memorable and gave Chris conviction. His death is crucial. You can consider this. Wesker's death in Resident Evil 1 was later revealed as a fake, creating one of the series' most iconic villains in whole Resident Evil series. At 26, Piers' potential return holds even greater weight for Chris' storyline, since the reunion can give aging Chris stronger conviction. And even his death in Resident Evil 6 and Death Island is framed solely through Chris' perspective, similar to how Chris believed Jill was dead for 3 years in Resident Evil 5, which can be defined as a plot setting. So it's very easy to write a script to bring him back to life.
Jill.
Second, House is a world-ending threat, and Piers' final electric strike against it must have killed him. Well, the series has flexible rules in some ways. Wesker in Resident 5 can dodge bullets. Simonson 6 injected with enhanced C-virus, transformed 6 times like Robot Wolf and Fly, and it even requires coordinated rocket and environmental lightning strikes for his final takedown. Even the plot that House can be killed by Chris with a knife stab can prove the rule to some extent. Crucially, House was prematurely hatched, and its real threat lies in spreading infection when compared to direct damage. Third, if Piers survived, he'd become a BOW, which betrays his anti-bioweapon ideals. Better to let him die. Capcom has established clear precedents for reversing mutations. Krauser in 4 freely controls his mutating arm. Simmons undergoes several distinct transformations, and Jake's C-virus antibodies exist as a narrative device. Given these examples, restoring Piers through and C-virus antibodies can be entirely consistent with the series' logic. Fourth, Capcom hasn't changed death outcomes in remakes just like Lewis in RE4. I prefer to classify such characters as secondary roles, though I appreciate the expanded characterization of Lewis in the remake. This doesn't elevate him beyond his original narrative purpose of enriching the plots. In contrast, Piers and Wesker are the plot drivers. Wesker could be reimagined as the franchise's primary overarching antagonist, considering the expanded remake lore, while Piers can stand ready to continue Chris' storyline as his field partner and successor.
There's irony for you. A man who spent his entire life trying to destroy the world, and now his son is the only one who can save it.
And here I am coming to rescue him.
His combat expertise, perseverance, willpower, and character depth far surpass the dead remake-only characters. Crucially, he remains the only deceased protagonist who was fully playable throughout the entire storyline of numbered titles. In my opinion, how will he return to the main story in Resident Evil 9 in a plausible way from his decease? Resident Evil 8's ending reveals BSAA deploying BOW soldiers, prompting Chris to investigate BSAA European headquarters afterwards. Though unverified, some leaks suggest Resident Evil 9 could be set in Southeast Asia, where near the House facility in the South China Sea. Considering that the House laboratory is very large, there must be some people who know about it, and any organization can come and salvage mutated Piers. Regardless of the leak's credibility, this opens narrative possibilities, such as a faction recovering Piers' mutated body for research in a Southeast Asian lab, or BSAA Europe lab. Combined with existing C-virus antibodies, either scenario could justify a rescue mission to reintegrate Piers into the main story. Drawing from Resident Evil 5's cryogenic preservation of gel and concepts, like Fallout 4's Vault-Tec, Piers could be kept in frozen suspension to halt aging. This would preserve his 26-year-old body, making him a fitting successor to the 52-year-old Chris in 2025. I even think that Capcom initially intended to continue Piers' story after Resident Evil 6, but the game's divisive reception, due to its exaggerated action and controversy over the plots, probably led to the series' soft reboot with Resident Evil 7, thus the plan was put on hold. Now, Resident Evil 9 could revisit those shelved plans.
Yes, sir.
That is all the content of this video. Thank you for your watching.